Welcome to British American Colonists at Work and Home. This is Melinda Cole Klein. Scattered throughout the Middle Colonies and New England colonies, small specialty shops, especially engaged in ironworking, glassmaking, hat making, lumber milling, and brick making emerged. They were devoted mainly to extraction of raw materials and service. The colonial economy generally conformed to mercantilist policies of the day. Colonies existed as a source of raw materials and as a market for finished goods. Ship manifests list a variety of items to be carried to the West Indies, to England, or to European ports. This would include lumber, masts, barrel staves, and dried codfish were foremost among the cargoes, along with the occasional wheat load or corn, barreled beef or pork from New England farms. In addition, there were handmade items such as bowls, buckets, brooms, and other articles carved and whittled by Yankee farmers during the long winter evenings. From the West Indies, New England ships brought to port sugar and molasses for processing. From England came cotton cloth and woolens, fine furniture and silver, and wrought iron implements. Ships returned from the continent of Europe with salt, wine, oranges, grapes, and silks. To ensure mercantile practices desired by the British government, Parliament tightly regulated colonial manufacturing. However, it was not until the 1760s that serious efforts were made to enforce anti-business laws. By then, it was too late, and revolution was the result. Colonial planters, trading merchants, frontiersmen, and craftsmen artisans comprised the four largest colonial family economies. These colonials were business owners, rich and poor. They were the employer class. They were the landowners and took an active role in politics. While colonial regions would specialize in certain economies, family enterprises formed the foundation of the mercantilist colonial economy. By looking at these four economic enterprises, it will be possible to view the British American colonists at work and home. When viewed as a whole, the British American economy was regionally specialized. New England, Massachusetts, including what would become Maine, Rhode Island, New Hampshire, and Connecticut, these colonists were small farmers, fishermen, engaged in trade and commerce, specialty craftsmanship, and they were shipbuilders. The middle colonies, including Pennsylvania, New York, New Jersey, and Delaware also fits in this category somewhat, engaged in trade and commerce and the production of a wide range of agricultural products. The farms of Pennsylvania and New Jersey produced abundant crops of wheat, corn, fruits, and vegetables for local sale or for export, and like New York and Philadelphia, served as trading, financial, and cultural centers. This region was a magnet for immigrants seeking work opportunities. Land was abundant, wages were high, and land prices were cheap. The southern colonies, including Georgia, South Carolina, North Carolina, Virginia, Maryland, and Delaware, were almost wholly agricultural. Large and small farms. Limited specialty craftsmanship in towns, as working with one's hands, became associated with slavery. Colonies extracted raw materials such as timber for export, each processing a backcountry yeomanry, with each colony dominated by a colonial planter elite class that depended on a single crop. In Virginia, that crop was tobacco. In South Carolina, it was rice. British American colonists pursued these family economies at home until the early to mid-1800s. Keep in mind it was common for the head of household or other members to specialize in a second or third economy. For example, a local minister or farmer might be a wonderful cabinet maker to which his neighbors would seek out his services. I have 7 categories I would like you to think about. Number 1, farmer. Grows crops on small and large family farms. Number 2, maritime commerce, the largest employer in the colonial period. This would include shipbuilders, mariners, traders, and merchants involved in the seaport carrying trade. Number 3, urban craftsmen and artisans provided products and/or services to their communities. This would include shipbuilding, craftsmen, harness makers, baker, butcher, coachmaker, midwives, apothecaries, glassmaker, and a range of others such as sailmakers, masons, barbers, carpenters, dressmakers, and tailors, to list only a few. Number 4, fishing. By type, this family enterprise could range from coastal to long-distance fishing off the coast of Newfoundland and the Grand Banks. Rich fishing grounds known for cod, a popular European and colonial fish. Whaling became one of the more lucrative enterprises for ship owners due to the demand for whale oil used for illumination by lamp and a lubricant for machinery until the discovery of petroleum in Pennsylvania by the mid-19th century. Number 5, colonists owned taverns and inns as places of hospitality, justice, business, and centers of politics. Number 6, a small portion of the population held the rank of gentlemen. These colonists owned property considered the best suited to govern and make colonial laws, and likely enjoyed a level of wealth. Often they served in a professional capacity such as physician, lawyer, minister, or teacher, or were a farmer or a trading merchant. And number 7, small-time manufacturing, such as those owning rum distilleries to processing whale blubber. Both of these commodities would have spoiled quickly, so processing was necessary in the colonies. Because of this, allowable manufacturing done by family enterprises in the colonies, this made products available to colonists for local consumption. Today and yesterday, a well-rounded intellectual, whether a teacher, politician, these individuals are university educated, financially settled, well-read in philosophy, converse among peers effectively, and has traveled abroad. Thousands of colonists fit into this category. And thousands of migrants settled the rich tidewater lands in the southern colonies that would include Virginia, the Carolinas, Maryland, Delaware, and Georgia. To understand these political elites by type is to see him through a biographical sketch. The planter society and culture of the southern colonies would, from early settlement, come to dominate colonial politics. Elite southern families often had aristocratic lineage. Duty and honor expected marriage and the production of children to carry on the family name and economic enterprise. Young men and women largely accepted their roles, their family responsibilities, and the expectations their families held for them. A plantocracy is a government that is ruled by a planter society. In essence, an oligarchy, a small collection of like-minded, wealthy planters who held positions as justices, bureaucrats, and colonial politicians. Typically, they owned large plantations and profited from colonial trade with European market buyers. Settling frontier lands were one of the opportunities for Southern homesteading families. For poor whites and blacks, the frontier would be one of the few Southern areas in which they could establish livelihoods far from the critical eye of powerful planters. This society and culture rarely shared the worldview of the planters. Often, and sometimes violently, these two groups clashed over laws, road building, protection from Indian raids on the frontier, colonial policies, and tax issues. A biographical analysis of a planter aristocrat, such as William Byrd II of Virginia, illustrates the level of education, political participation, and the level of success enjoyed by a typical planter aristocrat. William Byrd II lived during the middle colonial period. This would be from 1674 to 1744. His father had come to Virginia in 1670 to accept lands inherited from a relative rather than remaining in England and selling the colonial estate. It was common knowledge plantation economies were a source of what many saw as an unlimited source of wealth if managed effectively. This would allow a householder the ability to offer his family a fine quality of life that may not have been possible had this person remained in Britain. Like other boys of his rank and breeding, William Byrd II was educated in Europe. First to understand business as taught by Dutch masters in Amsterdam, and then sent to London to study law at Gray's Inn. From Byrd's diary, we know at school he did not limit himself to law. He wrote papers on slavery and economics, contributed articles on biology and zoology, and participated in amateur theatrics and exhibited an interest in science. When William's father believed his son was educated enough, William would pursue a political career in Virginia as a House of Burgesses representative. Later, William II became a representative before the Board of Trade. All the while, William's father managed the family plantation at a profit. After his political stint in Virginia, William traveled abroad. In 1705, Byrd's father died. As his father had intended, William inherited all the lands and the estate monies from his father. He had inherited over 26,000 acres of land, 200 slaves, a trading business, plantation tobacco mills, and a new house on a 1,200-acre plantation in Westover, situated on the west of Williamsburg on the James River. Like other boys of his class, William Byrd II had to assume the responsibilities of a well-to-do planter. At the time, Virginia was plagued with low prices, overproduction, and rising import duties. William knew that his plantation lands were worn out from the years of growing tobacco. Choosing a viable solution, William reduced the planting of tobacco and diversified into growing grains such as wheat. As a husband and father, William bought new lands, considered the only safe colonial investment. However, Bird's friends had continued to plant tobacco in a declining market. Unfortunately, some of his friends ended up living on credit and owned little land, as many had to mortgage what they had to survive. Planters lived out their lives in such a manner. Bird left his son 180,000 acres of land when he died in 1744. William had served in politics like his father and grandfather. However, William Byrd III lacked the education, drive, judgment, and business acumen of his forefathers. Sadly, William Byrd III squandered his inheritance. And when the American Revolution began, he chose to remain a loyalist and not join the patriot cause. Taverns were not established purely for travelers. Taverns were social and political public spaces for the townspeople, headquarters for news, and a place in which alcohol was sold along with food. First on the door there would likely be a list of names of common drunkards, part of the judicial system in New England. From the Middle Ages, public institutions, this would include churches, taverns, and town halls, served as places to which people communicated right and wrong doing by community members. If a tavern owner did not comply with city ordinances, his or her license could be revoked. Colonial women owned taverns as well as men. This feature was most noticeable in seaport towns of the Middle and New England colonies than it was in the South. New England tavern owners were required to limit alcohol consumption by limiting the time spent in a tavern. New England colonies had a long history striving as model communities. In the South, it was different. It was common belief that a Southern gentleman, no matter how much he drank, would never get drunk, as he was always in full control. All the while, unfree persons, this would include apprentices, indentured servants, and slaves, along with Indians and women, whether they were black or white, had duties to others and were not to be spending time in taverns unless they were employed there or a part of the management. Unlike in the southern colonies, New England colonists considered and wrote laws to control moral behavior. History has shown a strong connection between vice, this is sinful behavior, fornication, self-indulgent activities, and laziness, and negative financial consequences such as poverty and family breakup. In the long run, to be self-supportive then and now, adults need to lead moral lives in which self-regulation begins at home. This is a model of behavior established by the ancient Greeks, reaffirmed by Renaissance humanists, and promoted ardently by Puritans. It would be through Puritanism that commercial profit, a sign of God's grace, would be tied to the underpinnings of moral living. One could not have without the other. Prosecuting drunks for excessive drinking is only one example of orderly and moral living. Other examples included, but not limited to, sexual misconduct, verbal abuse, laziness, customs such as marriage and family not observed, establishing residence and employment, becoming poor, and issues of religion. Bad manners and nasty words spoken by children to their parents, especially in New England, were not allowed. The wandering poor were warned out of towns in New England, Charity for the poor was limited to established residents of the town. Residence was established by having a business or buying a farm and paying one's taxes. New England towns created laws against laziness in line with English common law. In the southern colonies, such as in the Carolinas, Virginia, Delaware, Georgia, and Maryland, these areas and colonists had little interest in spending colonial tax money to prosecute residents for moral behavior and misdeeds. These colonies were not founded on religious principles and morality, but on turning profits. Though, if a white man while drunk injured someone or private property and there was a complaint, then local magistrates took legal action to prosecute. These southern colonies were dominated by a wealthy class of elites who admonished a moral code of conduct internally in the culture. This was an honor-bound society. In this culture, unless a man was of substantial means, he should not be in taverns in the first place. His time belonged to someone else, and likely he should be doing that job. Trade would, in time, bring great wealth to New England. By 1640, commerce and shipbuilding were the colony's two primary economic pursuits, as New England seaport towns, large and small, hosted a rich variety of skilled craftsmen. New England's rocky soil and long winters stood in sharp contrast to the fertile land and mild climate of Virginia. The economy of the region would have amounted to little had agriculture continued to be the base in the colder colonies near Boston and beyond. A merchant carried the meaning of one who traffics to remote countries. Don't confuse this role with the corner market or bookseller. The merchant was no mere shopkeeper. This family enterprise bought and sold goods, bought more, and resold to ports all over the world, transporting his cargo in ships built by craftsmen from his home region. This family economy owned ocean-going merchant ships to fishing vessels, whalers, and coasters for trading along the Atlantic seaboard. The range of merchandise was anything that proved to be profitable, fish to tobacco to lumber to furs. The New England merchants sold at both wholesale and retail, offered banking transactions, and underwrote insurance policies. When the occasion called for it, the merchant was not above smuggling. In time of war, the merchant accepted government contracts to arm ships and prey on enemy vessels as a privateer, in return for a share of whatever ships and cargoes captured. The merchant was perhaps the quintessential Yankee. This family enterprise made members wealthy. An obvious sign of this wealth was measured by material goods. A brick mansion in Boston, a country estate, a nice carriage and horses, imported furnishings, and quality tailored clothing. All the while, merchants, especially in seaport towns in New England and the middle colonies, became magistrates, judges, clergymen, lawyers, and had a powerful influence in colonial government. Unlike the privileged sons of the planter class, Yankee sons often spent time in their youth as apprentices learning the business in the only proper way, by going to sea and trading in far-off lands. In trading with colonies of the West Indies, this would be the Spanish, the Dutch, the French, and the English, Yankee merchants made hefty profits in trade goods. Vegetables and wheat, for sugar to process into rum, slaves in exchange for sugar, colonial smoked pork for imported Spanish lemons, limes, and oranges, timber in exchange for potatoes and cash profits. The processing of sugar into rum created huge colonial profits for planters and those who invested in sugar in hopes of a positive return on their principal risks. From the early colonial period to the late 1750s, 75% of British American vessels were built in New England. Needless to say, with a skilled labor force, apprenticeship labor, and access to timber, the New England seaport towns had a monopoly on shipbuilding, and with their quality well known, they were a sure thing. Expanding trade and markets naturally stimulated New England's shipping industry. When England defeated France in 1713, ending Queen Anne's War, peace meant mercantile profits. Britain had acquired Newfoundland and surrounding fishing grounds. New England fishermen were quick to take advantage of the abundant codfish in the waters off the colony, enjoying 2 fishing seasons. By 1717, colonial ships were allowed to trade once again with the French West Indies, a profitable market for New England fishermen and merchants in general. Trade with island colonies increased the importation of molasses. 63 distilleries ran full-time in Massachusetts by 1750. The result was, in New England taverns, rum became so inexpensive for patrons it replaced the popularity of beer and cider as the favorite colonial beverage. Rum soon became an important product in the Atlantic Triangle trade between England, Europe, with Africa and the Americas, provided by colonial ships and those from Europe. Inexpensive colonial lumber and timber as raw materials enabled the expansion of the British Empire. This demand for colonial lumber, which also included pitch, tar, masts, and turpentine, by the British government and by business owners in general, such as furniture shops, led to a healthy and long-lasting timber industry in the British colonies until it was disrupted by the American Revolution. Timber made its way to build the homes and factories in the West Indian sugar colonies. On return trips, trading vessels exchanged for sugar for the much-needed timber, fresh food, and grain, along with furniture from England. Guns, textiles, and hardware, along with household goods, were sold in Africa in exchange for labor, and in North America as imported commodities. New England had a strong family-based economy centered on small household economies. Slavery did not turn profits for the small farmer, north or south, or for that matter, the urban artisan. All the while, due to seasonal underemployment because of the weather and a healthy apprenticeship system in New England, indentured servants immigrated in the majority to middle colony port towns, such as Philadelphia on the Delaware River, or to New York City. Both of these towns were in constant demand for urban labor. Merchant traders as a class were opportunistic, accomplished, well-traveled, and sure of themselves. Merchants invested their personal capital into selling a product in a place where there was a need. Knowing the market of the intended consumer was key to the merchant's success. Misinformation, a pirate attack, or an unscrupulous captain could lead to failure and financial loss. Sadly, these were common risks. Financial risk and reward are intertwined. While finances may be risked for a measure of gain to be made, reward is neither sure nor certain. British America brought colonists for different reasons. While some came as a matter of mere curiosity, most colonists, free and indentured, who arrived at these shores desired something different than what their lives had been prior to traveling across the Atlantic. And some settlers, those with intelligence and a knack for trade, advanced quickly to accumulate enormous wealth by engaging in long-distance trade. With Boston's interest in education and the desire to read, this commercial market enabled a 21-year-old immigrant, Thomas Hancock, early success. Hancock arrived in Boston in 1724 as a bookseller. With the measure of risk, he had invested in an agreement with a supplier to sell 3,000 books for a 6% commission. From this beginning, Hancock adapted to consumer trends. He gradually moved into general merchandise. In a relatively short period of time, Thomas Hancock formed a trading house, this is a company, and purchased ships. This mode of business required accountability and trust. Hancock hired mariners to sell his goods to faraway lands and acquire products by forming this trading company in efforts to produce large profits. By 1734, he took his nephew, John Hancock, into the business. Located in central Boston, the Hancock store flourished. This store housed lace and ribbons, cloth from Europe, silk from China, brass compasses, buckles, hourglasses, and a selection of swords. Sales to local and regional consumers included rum, tea, coal, salt, and leather products. During his second decade in business, the House of Hancock sold wholesale to other colonials, and this became a core feature of the business. Backcountry merchant traders and shopkeepers of Massachusetts and from neighboring colonies sent orders to Hancock for merchandise expected. Hancock ordered finished goods from European sellers in exchange for colonial products. Most sales were made on credit, and debts were frequently paid in commodities rather than coin. Communication was crude, and it took ages to conduct business. The honesty and reliability of a merchant was crucial in his or her success in business and trade adventures. In addition, the foresight or the ability of a merchant to project that a certain product would turn a profit would make or break a company. However, it seems that voyages to the West Indies and beyond local regions were profitable more often than not, creating huge profits to allow some families like the Hancocks to live well. In times of war, Thomas Hancock made hefty profits by entering into privateering contracts with the British government. These were in the years 1744 to 1748 and 1756 to 1760. In times of peace, Hancock was not above smuggling. Though illegal, it was customary in America by the 1750s to bribe customs officers to avoid paying actual taxes or duty. Thomas Hancock built up a tremendously successful business. Upon his death in 1764, he had left the bulk of his estate to John Hancock, a fortune of £70,000. Young John became an extremely wealthy man by colonial standards. John, however, did not have his uncle's single-minded devotion to business and turning a profit. Revolutionary politics interested him more. In 1775, he liquidated his business and became the first signer of the Declaration of Independence. With the privilege of hindsight, this was an excellent move. It would be pioneers who would risk their lives and capital to settle America. After all, America was not unpeopled. From 1635, numerous fishing and farming regions in Massachusetts, which had started along the coastal areas, had begun to extend into western and northern settlements of the interior. Frontier family members, as a group, left little in the way of journals or other personal writings for historians to use in evaluation of their personal lives and economies. However, other sources offer an insight into their economic mode, which they valued in heading to create a farm on the frontier, and what they took with them for this arduous journey. An evaluation of frontier records and the stuff they brought with them, these are obtained from store ledger books, and property they left behind, this is material wealth recorded in wills, these documents offer a view of this pioneering society. One incentive in Massachusetts for moving to the western frontier was a 3-year exemption from property taxes. In New England, sometimes entire church congregations would make such a move and settle a new region. All the while, they did this knowing that what may lie ahead, hardships of disease and death. From store records, it has been determined a pioneering family heading out to the New England frontier would have purchased the following items. I have listed the following 6 in order of importance. Number 1, a flintlock rifle for protection against Indian and wild animals, and to provide the family with deer and bear meat. This would also include a shotgun with which to hunt small game such as birds. Number 2, for these weapons, frontier families needed flints, powder, lead, and a bullet mold. Number 3, metal and leather products such as an axe and a hoe, along with animal harnessings and a metal plow blade. Number 4, for cooking, a frontier family took with them metal frying pans and cooking pots. Number 5, traveling and settlement provisions included salted pork, molasses and butter, several dozen bushels of grain, wheat and barley in particular, peas and beans, cheese, sugar, spices, a bushel of salt, and candles. In addition to a mule that would be used for plowing, the family might have another livestock item, such as an ox, or perhaps a choice of cattle, a bull or a milk cow, a few pigs, and some chickens. Frontier families were usually large. All members helped in clearing of the land, building of structures, tending of the animals, and the harvesting of crops. In white frontier families, the men did all the heavy work with the machinery, like implements, and did the hunting and plowing with their sons and neighbors. Women tended the home front, spinning cloth, tanning leather, making milk into butter, and tending their vegetable gardens, making meals, washing, along with tending the children and educating them along the way. In black frontier families, the women also worked in the fields like Native American women. This did not mean that some women did not fish or hunt. The point I am trying to make is that pioneer work was usually distributed in most homes in this fashion. In settlements with long cold winters, most of the family's time together was spent around the fireplace. During the long cold winter months, family members busied themselves with the making of commodities they would later trade or sell, such as brooms, candles, weaving cloth into blankets, the making of leather goods. Other activities included routine chores such as mending clothing and reading to their children from the Bible. Frontier homes were usually small and compact, while each had an area that served several purposes. In addition, outbuildings would be needed for tools and animals, if not housed near the family structure in a lean-to addition. Windows in pioneer homes were usually small and open rectangles and shuttered when the evening came. Glass was too expensive for frontier families. Fresh air was at a minimum, and as to not lose heat or the element of security, this is another reason why the windows were kept very small. Pioneer families could be nearly self-sufficient with their own production of milk, eggs, cured meats, cheeses, fresh vegetables, sheep for wool, and grains grown themselves. As more frontier families settled the western fringes of the colonies, homemade products appeared more and more at markets for sale and trade. This led to a demand in frontier milling of grains into flour and cornmeal, lumber mills for the processing of trees, while frontier families needed salt, spices, shoes, and gunpowder. The expansion of the market economy by frontier families led to a need for roads. Unlike in Virginia, road building in Massachusetts was not only encouraged but maintained. Local town authorities collected taxes to convert trading trails into paths for wagons. Colonists in New England settlements donated their time. Each community was required to provide enough male volunteers for 2 weeks a year to train as militiamen and or as a part of a crew that helped to maintain the roads. Ideals in the common good as a philosophy runs deep in the American character. Wealthy tidewater plantation owners in Virginia did not create taxes to benefit the economy of frontiersmen, whom they felt were at the bottom of the social ladder politically and economically. In other words, if the wealthy lent a hand to their social inferiors, in time they might become a society that would compete with their authority and power, not to mention the threat to their wealth and lifestyles. In New England, by 1650, the frontier areas had been assessed and recorded. Thus, property taxes could be demanded. This system in colonial Massachusetts paid for road maintenance, the governor's salary, and that of other government officials, along with maintaining church and school buildings, while providing salaries for ministers and school teachers. In addition, there were public buildings, bridges, Harvard College, today's Harvard University. Keep in mind, in the event of war, all towns were to contribute the cost of defending their regions against enemy attacks and invasion. The colonial frontiersmen, as a class of individuals, are descended from thousands of Scots-Irish and other free immigrants, and likely an equal number of former indentured servants or transported British convicts. This colonist had a rebellious spirit, but like his social betters, desired to live off the land, feudal in culture, and had a strong sense of honor and family ties. In the greatest numbers, they settled in western Pennsylvania, Western Virginia, along with Kentucky and Tennessee. They were a whiskey-drinking, quick-tempered, stubborn, self-serving, quick with a gun, and individualistic, with little respect for English laws or authority in general. Andrew Jackson would emerge from this frontier culture during the War of 1812. Frontiersmen, by necessity, were craftsmen as well as farmers, but their craftsmanship was of an occasional nature, engaged mainly to provide for their family. In seaport towns and villages of New England and the middle colonies, there was a healthy urban population of master craftsmen and their apprentices on whom people depended for colonial-made shoes, silverware, pots and pans, houses, clothing, hats and wigs, cabinets, glassware, bricks, whale oil, ships, and many other products. These items were purchased locally or sold to a nearby colony, such as to the sugar planters of the West Indies, as they imported all their material needs. While most craftsmen were men, women operated and owned trade shops inherited from husbands. In the southern colonies, most manual labor was associated with slavery or produced by slaves. The quality was mediocre at best. However, planters needed crafted containers in which to store and ship their agricultural products. Free white craftsmen in the South had their economic livelihoods undermined from the cheapness of crafted goods produced using slave labor. Therefore, only a token white craftsmanship economy developed. In addition, because of the base quality of these products, most consumers preferred to purchase barrels and casks from colonial-produced imports, such as those from Philadelphia or points north. It would be in these containers tobacco, corn, wheat, turpentine, tar, flour, and rice would be loaded onto seagoing vessels. The majority of the population, by definition tax-paying landowners, fit into one of these categories: planters, merchants, frontiersmen, or craftsmen. As one of the four most prominent colonial entrepreneurs found in this pre-industrial economy, the artisan craftsmen, by type, were foundational to the continued success not only of the families they supported, but the colonial economy at large. This colonial business, by type, offered services or produced a finished product that was served and purchased by a consumer, either local or otherwise. Paul Revere, like thousands of other men and women in the colonies, engaged in a business as a result of training as an apprentice, formally or within one's family, which would be informally. The skilled craftsman was a valuable asset to towns and villages. Paul Revere of Boston, later a well-known revolutionary patriot, was a colonial silversmith and an engraver. His father had immigrated from France as a French Protestant. Before Paul was of legal age and ready to assume the family business, his father had died. Together, Paul and his mother ran the family business, as it was the custom. Skilled tradesmen and artisan and mariner wives often served as deputy husbands to the family business when their husbands were away. Once a widow, women headed the family business, if she chose to, and this was not unusual in the Middle and New England colonial seaport towns. Nonetheless, Paul learned the trade well from his father and his mother. in their shop, acquiring a solid reputation for producing superior quality products. By 1760, Paul had designed fine silverware, elegant tankards, bowls, pitchers, and tea sets, which have been treasured by their owners and museums over the centuries. In Paul Revere's Boston shop, he was as much an artist as a craftsman of kneaded silver products, while he also engraved metal plates for newspapers and other publications. The seaport towns such as Boston, New York, Philadelphia, and Baltimore, with their larger populations and flow of commerce, provided the craftsmen, locals, and immigrants with a ready market for these products. Professional craftsmen found the greatest market for their skills in the northern cities of Boston, Philadelphia, and New York. Crafts flourished where populations were dense, slave labor low, and where trade and commerce were a way of life. All the while, the demand for colonial-made ships broadened the shipbuilding industry from New England to the middle colonies. To build a ship and outfit there, a minimum of 30 skilled craftsmen and artisans were needed. In shipbuilding, as only one example in which craftsmen artisans were needed, the list is long, and here are a few. Cabinet makers, joiners, block makers, rope makers, sail makers, metalsmith, iron founders, and the list goes on. In addition, the town artisans who produced supplies or acquired them for seagoing voyages included several elements of the town, such as bakers, distillers, merchant traders, chart makers, brewers, butchers, and candle makers. Skills were passed on from father to son, while wives and daughters waited on customers and kept account records, if shown to possess good math skills, and served as a secondary level of skilled labor when needed. Should the artisan have no sons, he might take on 1 or 2 apprentices. It would be advantageous for a young man to cozy up to the master's daughter, as the son-in-law would likely inherit the business, a wise and acceptable practice by families. Across Europe for centuries, master apprentices created guilds that were made up of a committee of members. This group regulated the quality of craftsmanship, the number of apprentices a master may have at any given time, and other economic factors. Immigrants, free and unfree, that migrated to America did not want to see this type of regulatory body established, as it limited the potential of businesses. As a result, the tightly controlled medieval system of guilds and craftsman regulation was not instituted in the colonies. Guilds also regulated wages and insisted on high quality of craftsmanship. These political economic groups also controlled who could or could not do business in their town. As a customary community institution, guilds held considerable power that could bring ruin to family economies and unfair treatment to benefit others. Those starting out in America did not want economic limitations. Anyway, land was cheap and skilled labor was too scarce. Thus, supply and demand, along with the custom knowing of what you were buying, buyer beware, became the regulators of quality and price, while some colonies did pass laws in an attempt to protect consumers from shoddy goods and dishonest weights and measures. The craftsman's best insurance for success, however, was a reputation for honesty and good work.